tolerate your friend, your neighbor, to have an opinion different from yours. You don't have to call him names. He has a right to differ from you. That is his fundamental right. And he was not made so as to be managed by you or guided by you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, guys, for your great support. Now, fellow Kenyans, today is Friday, and of course, we know very well what normally happens on Thursday night. It's normally the night of the news gang, which is normally being held by Yvon Okwara. We have JKIA, Obonyo, we have got Jamila, and also some Gituko. They normally do round up or give us the recap of what has happened over the week, and also add to what they think as journalists, what they think is happening in the country, and maybe they also give us the solution, what they think needs to be done or needs to happen. In the past 1 week, a lot of issues has happened. William Ruto going to France, the issue of the compensation, and the issue of Laikipia. A lot of issues have been going on. A lot of issues have been happening here and there. School issues to do with schools and tolerance. A lot of issues have been going on. And that is why now I want us to discuss this. I normally tell you guys that if you want to know what has happened in the country, or you want to know what has happened during the news gang, if at all you miss that chance, you can automatically come to Bonita Media every morning so that you can know what has gone, what happened, what they talked about. Because I normally give out the recap, just the recap of their kicker and also their whatever they talk about. You understand? I think all of us knows. Now, it happened that Yvon Okwara missed this. I don't know where she went to, but she really missed this yesterday night's news gang. We know who Yvon Okwara is. The way she normally roasts the government, she doesn't really spare them. She missed it. But despite the fact that she made it, that did not really mean that now these guys did talk about sense or did talk about what really happened. First of all, I want us to start by listening to JKIA. JKIA was talking about the issue of the compensation. Of course, before William Ruto left for France, for the G7 in France, they compensated whereby they issued a lot of money, a very huge amount of money, to the people that lost their loved ones during the demonstrations. And JKIA was talking about this, and they said that there is a difference between compensation and impunity. And of course, after Ruto had decided to now compensate those who died, there is something that compensating for these people is not bad. But then there are a lot of things that really need to be looked at before you, or when you decide to talk about compensation, or when you decide now to give this money. Can you listen to JKIA?
On my kicker tonight, yes, it is okay to compensate victims of the government's violent repression of political protests. Yes, they deserve every penny on offer, and indeed, more than can possibly be offered. But yes, compensate. Then what? What happens to the elephant in the room? What happens to the deep-rooted, deplorable culture of impunity that generates such victims almost every election year since 2007? What happens to the offender now that the victim is compensated? What should we do about the impunity that creates the environment for such acts of needless harm to happen? Just a reminder, take a look at this.
On Thursday, 30th March 2023, this rogue policeman turned up for duty, apparently donning the attire of choice for the nasty assignment of picking out journalists. March 20th, using a tear gas canister. The officer is said to be a corporal by...
We should never forget this incident. That is the signature video of official impunity. Trained conditioned and socialized to fight and indeed hate the political opposition, especially certain figures such as the late Raila Odinga. Some men in uniform or national plainclothes, if I can call them that, over-delivered, especially during or after elections. They descended to low levels of partisan militia, protecting narrow political interests in the name of the state and in the name of the government and country. In the process, many innocent Kenyans fell victim. Take a look at this one. What was his sin and where are his assaulters today?
Oh my God, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Jesus Christ of Nazareth. This is Oyugis.
You know, in incidents like this, victims suffer lifelong damage, both physically and mentally. So it is not enough to compensate. What guarantees do we give that the impunity cycle itself will be broken? Lots of Kenyans, lots of families are tonight living with permanent scars that are direct consequence of official impunity. Take the family of baby Pendo Samantha, killed by overzealous police officers who are out in Kisumu to do what they have routinely done and dutifully done since 2007, which is impose a presidential election result. That little casket of baby Pendo is just one of the many images of an impunity trail that no compensation can cover. Impunity must be confronted by holding all its agents accountable. Only then will compensation make sense.
Now, just under that, Jamila also mentioned something to do with the value of human life, where Jamila was asking a question that you find that most of the time in Kenya, people die, and then after people's death, we don't normally, during the protests and everything, we don't really value people's lives. I think she connected. It was in line with the statement of JKIA. That is why I've decided to follow the two of them. Listen to Jamila.
In my opinion, one of the most troubling questions facing Kenya today is whether we still value human life the way we should. Because when I look around, I increasingly find myself asking whether we have become numb to death, whether we have become so accustomed to tragedy that what should shock us no longer does. Take the recent protests in Laikipia against the proposed Ebola facility. People lost their lives. Post-mortem examinations reportedly showed bullet wounds. Families buried their loved ones. Yet within days, the national conversation had largely moved on. Remember the June 2024 protests and the demonstrations that followed? Scores of young Kenyans lost their lives. To date, families are still waiting for answers, accountability, and closure. The question is, what does that say about us? If a society truly values human life, the loss of even one life should matter. Instead, we seem to have developed a disturbing ability to move on. Bodies are found, autopsies reveal violence, families mourn, the headlines change, the families remain. That, for me, is where the real tragedy lies, in the normalization of death. What troubles me even more is the growing gap between compensation and accountability. Government has spoken about compensating some victims and affected families. Compensation is important, but it is not justice. Because justice requires answers. It requires accountability and establishing who was responsible and ensuring that responsibility is carried. Money can help a family survive, but it cannot explain why a son never came home, why a daughter was killed. It cannot explain why a parent was buried. Nor can it replace the dignity that comes from knowing that the truth has been established. The danger of failing to pursue accountability is that it sends a message that human life is negotiable, that some deaths matter more than others, and that some victims deserve justice while others deserve sympathy. That is a dangerous road for any democracy. And as we approach another anniversary of the June 25th protests, perhaps this is the conversation we should be having, not only about who died or how they died, but about what their deaths say about us as a society. Do we still believe that every life matters? Do we still believe that every death deserves an explanation? And do we still believe that justice should follow laws? Because if the answer to all that is yes, then we cannot simply move on. The families have not moved on, and perhaps neither should we. You see, the measure of a society is not how it treats the powerful when they are alive, but how it treats ordinary citizens when their lives are lost. And on that question, Kenya still has some very, very difficult conversations ahead.
Sam Gituku talked about tolerance and freedom of expression, which mostly subjects and is supported by politicians. You see, there is the issue of subjection of freedom of expression. Yes, we're allowed to express ourselves, but then you realize that there are some politicians somewhere who really minimize or who really limits people from expressing themselves, or maybe from saying things or doing things the way they're supposed to be done.
On my sense, I want to speak about tolerance. For the past many months, the space of freedom of expression has been shrinking in Kenya. We have allowed the polarizing nature of politics to divide us, blind us, and even push us to hate. Oftentimes, especially on the social media platforms, you will find Kenyans fighting each other. Fighting each other because they hold different opinions about common issues. And slowly, this has been turning to regionalism and even tribalism. The madness of election fever taking root many months before the general election. And we have seen people that have been to school descending so low to defend narratives that in their minds protect their political fathers. People that shared classrooms and lecture halls as they consumed that which was meant to open up their minds, turning against each other to hate and silence. In all this, total injustice done on Kenyans who have no way of telling between what is true and what is false, between what is genuine information and what is propaganda. And when those who wear designer clothes are done insulting each other on social media, they descend to the dark rooms and pseudo safe houses to organize. To organize how that which argument in big English has not achieved can be propelled by violence. And they recruit violent beings that can do anything as long as there is the promise of payment. And victims have been piling, harassed, beaten up, and robbed, left to cut their losses for that which they didn't establish. And slowly a country descends into lawlessness, where everyone finds their way to defend themselves while no one takes responsibility for public safety. And then I read Article 32 of the Constitution that assures every person in Kenya of freedom of conscience and opinion. No one can limit a person's thoughts. No one can limit another person's opinion. If anyone wills, they should provide information to persuade them to think otherwise. When you keep reading the Constitution, you land at Article 33 of the Constitution, the famous article on freedom of expression, a golden provision that protects everyone to say that which they believe to be true. That is how all persons in Kenya, young and old, men and women, office executives and farmhands, are free to seek information, receive information, or impart information or ideas. But then there is a limit. It is not freedom of expression when one promotes propaganda for war, when they incite others to violence, when they promote hate, whether in person, online, or inaction. And when one advocates for hatred, including ethnic incitement, vilification of others, or incitement to cause harm, that is not freedom of expression, and it is not protected by the Constitution. But then many, especially in the political class, are promoting this. They are busy profiling regions, tribes, economic sections, and more. And nobody seems to care. This is a call to conscience for every adult in Kenya. And yes, it can be confusing to use adult in some quarters, but to anyone above 18 years, we have work to do. We owe duty of care to our country, our generation, and future generations. Let people be. Let people hold their opinions. Persuade them and allow them to differ with you if they are not convinced. Tolerate their being, however irritating it might be. Because, as a former president once said, they were not created for you.
You tolerate your friend, your neighbor, to have an opinion different from yours. You don't have to call him names. He has a right to differ from you. That is his fundamental right. And he was not made so as to be managed by you or guided by you.
And Bonyo was against the members of parliament. Alisema kwamba nyinyi ni wajinga. Mnabo, nyinyi wabunge mnabo. Kwa nini?
Early this week, I watched the National Assembly debate the finance bill with growing disappointment. Given the significance of this legislation, I expected a robust, informed and evidence-based debate. Instead, much of what unfolded fell far short of that expectation. Even more concerning were instances where some members of parliament appeared to misrepresent the contents of this bill, risking further confusion among Kenyans who rely on parliament for accurate information. Sadly, this is not the first time the House has failed to rise to the occasion. But after the national conversation surrounding the finance bill of the last 2 years, Kenyans had every reason to expect a more serious and a more informed engagement this time around. The finance bill is arguably the most scrutinized piece of legislation that comes before Parliament each year. It determines how government raises its revenue and directly affects households, businesses, and the economy. Since 2024, ordinary Kenyans have demonstrated an unprecedented interest in its content, often reading it and analyzing its provisions themselves. It is only reasonable to expect that those elected to represent them would demonstrate an even deeper understanding of the bill. Well, granted, the finance bill is a technical bill. Tax legislation is rarely an easy read, but every member of parliament has access to parliamentary researchers, the legal team, and committee staff whose very role is to analyze legislation. If an MP lacks the time to interrogate the bill personally, taxpayers have already funded a support system to help them in doing exactly that. Unfortunately, shortcomings did not end with the second reading. The committee stage, where substantive amendments ought to receive meticulous scrutiny, often drifted into political exchanges rather than detailed examination of the proposed changes. Only a handful of MPs consistently engaged with the substance of the bill, proposing or defending amendments on their merits. The Committee of the Whole House, which was this afternoon, was perhaps the most disappointing. This is the final opportunity for Parliament to pronounce itself on legislation that will affect millions of us. One would have expected, therefore, a packed chamber and a sustained debate. Instead, the House struggled to maintain quorum, with the temporary Speaker repeatedly reminding the members to remain relevant to the question before the House and to stick to that debate. Ironically, some of the loudest voices on the finance bill at political rallies and press conferences were nowhere to be seen when it mattered most, inside the chambers where the laws are actually made. This pattern, unfortunately, reflects a deeper problem. Too often, members take political position on the finance bill long before they have studied its provisions. Support or opposition is determined by political alignment rather than legislative analysis. As the bill moves through Parliament, relatively few members invest their time required to understand its clauses and the implications. The result then is very predictable. Misinformation, public debate becomes clouded, and critical legislative processes is reduced into a political theatre. Then perhaps it is time for Parliament to invest in strengthening the members' legislative capacity on complex financial legislation, whether through a structured policy briefings, technical workshops, or internal forums, or just an internal public participation, so that they get better informed. Legislators would produce better informed discourse, and Kenyans would appreciate this. We deserve a parliament that debates facts instead of slogans, scrutinizes legislations instead of political narratives, and treats the finance bill with the seriousness that it commands.
The finance bill 2025-2026, 2026-2027, has been passed in Parliament and members of Parliament. A total of 129, I think. We had a total of 339 members of Parliament, including the nominated MPs and women reps. And I don't know the number that passed this bill. 40 of them did not voted no. I don't know how many will vote yes. So I'm yet to know. I'm still following up. I think by tomorrow we will know exactly the number, the total number of the people that voted yes and those who voted no. And we'll know ni kina nani na watu gani ambao hawakuwepo wakati wa maana kama huu, so that the people that their constituents can know that indeed we elected this leader, but he could not say anything in Parliament that at the time that we really needed him to stand with us as Kenyans. Now, that one said and done, fellow Kenyans, I want you to just listen to now the normal conversations that they had. And then after that, you will tell me what you think at the comment section. Yvon Okwara really missed this. I don't know where she went to. I don't know whether she was warned. Maybe what of Shikana. But her missing this kind of conversation at this time or at this point really draws a lot of attention and a lot of questions. But of course, saa zingine watu kuwa busy. Watu ushikamana ama watu ushikana. Can you watch this?
Talking about communication, tuendelekee katika uwanja wa ndege wa kimataifa wa Jomo Kenyatta, where there's an expansion project in the works, where questions have been raised about who exactly is being given the contract for this expansion, where a certain Zimbabwean businessman, Wiknel Chivayo, has been mentioned adversely, where headlines have talked about how he's in it, how now government is being forced to respond and talk about how this gentleman is not involved in any way, shape or form. Let's listen to CS Chirchir on the same.
I think the only features in the media, is not anywhere in our documents as a bidder, is not anywhere in our documents as a partner to any of the bidders. So we've just seen the way most of you have seen it in the media. We don't know him, and he's not participating in the bid as a solo or as a partner to any of the bidders.
You know, I think, gentlemen, very few people are arguing that JKIA does not need an expansion. It does need an expansion. You know, I keep remembering when it was raining and the leaking and all that was happening and the complaints from travelers, and how ukifika kwa airport unaanza kujiuliza what is, especially kama umetoka mahali ambapo kuna airport mzuri zaidi, because our airport is our gateway to the world. It is our it's central to tourism, to trade, to transportation, cargo movement, investment. I mean, we cannot understate the importance of JKIA. But then now I think the real story here is the confidence in the process. When reports come out that there is a project like this, Kenyans quickly rejected the government's explanation, especially in terms of the controversies or the secrecy or the lack of information surrounding what the contract is, who has been given, and even the amounts of money. Today the CS said the project will cost 154.2 billion shillings and it should be completed in 36 months. I think citizens of this country have reached a point where they no longer evaluate or look at government projects solely on their merits. When I evaluate, wanasema there's credibility questions in it. And this is a challenge. I think government having to be forced to speak out all the time. I think the question that comes up is that whole thing about communication. Why don't you just speak about it from the beginning instead of having to hear bits and pieces here that make people suspicious? Such large infrastructure projects they attract a lot of scrutiny, they attract a lot of questions, they attract a lot of maswali because they involve huge amounts of money. So naturally, citizens want answers, Linus, right?
Yes, and they do. They're not only asking for answers, but they also know that the upgrade, modernization, whatever you call it, of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is long overdue. The airport, as currently is an embarrassment. We are falling behind the region because of the state of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. For travelers who come in from other places, including Kenyans, you just need to compare what your takeoff looked like and what your landing, where you're landing at, looks like. Some time back when it was raining, the roof was leaking. So it's a dry season now, so nothing is leaking. That airport is in a very, very bad state. But what is equally in a bad state is government's failure to communicate a good project like that. I don't know why the mystery about Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And by the way, this will be the second time that governments are going to have a messy, is it second or third time actually? Third time. It's actually going to look messy for nothing. We can't do this airport at this rate where every time the discussion around the contracting comes up, it becomes a controversy. And currently it's become a controversy because Wycliffe Chivayo is a poster boy of tenderpreneurship. This is the face of influence, of private influence on public affairs, because Wycliffe Chivayo's wealth is built on his contracts that he's had with the Zimbabwean government, including one with on a solar project that apparently is never delivered. So immediately you have that name, and with the scrutiny we have here in Kenya, whether it's media, civil society, or the regular members of the public, you know, you should never forget in the Adani time, there was a protester that was saying, Wameiba airport. Do you remember?
Amkeni airport imeibwa, imeuzwa.
Yes. This was not a journalist. This was not a civil society person. This was a very regular mwananchi that was actually in the process of a protest. This country is very, very vigilant. I think people are always on the lookout, especially for what is not right. So, JKIA is a project whose time is now. It has to be done. We have to do that airport. But let's do it right and without controversy. And it's just about, and we hope the minister who spoke today, after waiting for so long to confirm things that he ought to have spoken about earlier, should now release and be open with the tendering process. Let's see who is it that has been picked to do the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, because a lot of time has been wasted. And I need to point out here, Bonyo, that in 2008, I think 2008-2009, when we had the Grand Coalition government, that was the first time that a conversation was had about Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Yeah. 3 leaders famously went to India and met Adani. There are photographs of the late former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, the current president who was then a minister in the cabinet, William Ruto. And I think there was also Musalia Mudavadi who was in that photo. And a number of permanent secretaries, as they were called that time. They were with Adani on a railway line, visiting a number of projects, including one in Ahmedabad, the airport that was done by Adani. 2008 to 2026, how many years are those, Sam?
18.
Yes. There's a lot of time that we waste on things that ought to be out of the way, and there are good things, including Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. It's time to refurbish and to modernize that airport, if not to fall behind some of our neighbors. But who we've already fallen behind.
The Dar es Salaam airport is amazing.
Look at the Dar es Salaam airport. If you look at the Bole International Airport in Ethiopia, and the upcoming Kigali International Airport, the new airport that is going to come up in Rwanda, we are going to look bad very soon with this contraption called the JKIA. But we look worse if the tendering and all this contracting business is not above